Welcome everyone to the Wednesday, March 16th regular board meeting of Northwestern Lee High School District. Would you please join me in the opening exercise?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, and please be seated, and please call the roll.
John Cassiano, Willard Delaker,
Here.
Joseph Fatzinger,
Here.
Todd Hernandez,
Here.
Becky Height, here, Lauren Hunsicker, here, Todd Weiser, Rachel Scheffler, here, Jennifer Senavides, here.
Thank you. We do have one modification to the agenda this evening. We were expecting to have Scott Scherer here in the beginning of the meeting to present the financial plan for the facilities master plan, but he's on the road from another meeting in Westchester, I believe, and his GPS tells him he'll be here at 8 o'clock. So we're going to delay having him till the end of the meeting and see how that works out with our agenda. So with that change, I would ask for approval of the agenda.
So moved.
Mr. Fatzinger,
Second.
seconded by Mrs. Scheffler. Comments or questions? Hearing none, all those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carried. We have an agenda. Welcome once again, and at this time we offer courtesy of floor to anyone who would like to address the board. Please rise and state your name and the township you live in. Sir.
Dave Miles, Whitehaven Township, class of 69. Just have a few comments related to the workshop meeting I watched online a few weeks ago. There was discussion about improvement projects in the middle school. And I'm not sure they're all necessary. The entrance beautification, maybe not. I don't know. The auditorium upgrade, I know the acoustics in there have been terrible since it was built. Maybe it's time for an upgrade. My kids suffered through concerts in that room, all 5 of them. I'm a little more concerned about the parking lot upgrade. If you're intending to put in a fuel tank, I think you better think about the security because people are stealing gas. Some cases they're stealing it right out of the buses. So you might want to make sure that you have some security there, even if you don't do that upgrade. I don't know if you've got monitors going now or not. Then just in general, if we're looking at 10% inflation in our society and you're dealing with a 3% cap on tax increases, I'm not sure how you're going to make ends meet. If you're going to continue to pay your teachers and have them be able to afford to actually come here and teach and so forth, be able to feed the students, run the buses. I don't know how you're going to do that. So I just suggest you be careful about where you spend your money. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Miles. Thanks for coming in for your comments. And these are all valid comments that we have to wrestle with and discuss and factor into the decisions that we have to make here. And thank you for pointing that out to us. Is there anyone else that would like to address the board at this time? We will have another opportunity at the end of the meeting for courtesy of the floor. And we'll move on to the next item on the agenda, and that would be to approve the minutes from the school board meeting on February 16th and a workshop on March 2nd.
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Fatzinger,
Second.
second by Dr. Hunsicker. Are there any comments or questions? Hearing none, all those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carried. So we'll skip over recognitions and presentations and wait to hear from Scott Shearer later. And I do not have a board president's report this evening. How about the superintendent's report?
I do. Lots has happened since we last met, mostly related to COVID-related concerns and COVID-related issues, all in a positive sense, however. And so I would just like to update the board on a couple things. You do get the information weekly with the numbers, obviously, in our buildings are low, and we expected that, stark downturn, and that has certainly happened. Since we met last, we have sent messages and updates about the following to our families, and subsequently also updated our health and safety plan. The transportation face covering order was removed. The CDC has updated the tiers that they previously used. So if you recall, they previously used just the 100,000 and the PCR. They have updated, and now every Friday they just announce the county's low, medium, high status. So that is now reflected in our health and safety plan because they updated that and we put that on our face covering update. We did update the physical distancing within the health and safety plan because it previously said information about zigzagging in the lunchrooms, and most of our lunchrooms have gone back to, I would say, some sense of normalcy in return. And so that part we did remove in our health and safety plan. We also informed families that the letter that we previously issued when there was a positive case would not be issued any longer, and that we would just update that tracker. So that tracker will be updated on the website, and we did change it, if you recall. And we removed the requirements for contact tracing as indicated by Department of Health. And so all of those changes are positive changes, but they did all happen since we talked last, and we've updated our families and updated our health and safety plan, as well as our tiered face covering matrix that are both available on the website to reflect all the changes. The other thing is also positive news. I will hope I'm going to embarrass her, but Christy Steigerwald, who you all know has been a loyal employee in the business office for 23 years, since 1999. And you've heard her many times mentioned by Leslie and Ryan in terms of assisting certainly in the business office. Recently completed the Pennsylvania Certified School Business Specialist certification. And she was granted the certificate by the Board of Directors of the Pennsylvania Association of School Business Officials. And we certainly are very proud of Christy and the work that she does in the business office and our skills that she provides to our admin office and our business office every single day. But we're also proud that she was able to meet these rigorous professional, personal, ethical, and professional standards that are associated with the Certified School Business Specialist certificate. So I just like to publicly recognize her. If you recall, Leslie received a similar designation several years ago, and Christy has gone through a similar program. So we're really proud of her every day, but certainly this is a good indication to mention her at a school board meeting because she does a lot of work in our business office, probably behind the scenes, which is why she would not necessarily want the public praise. But those are my two updates. If you have any questions about the health and safety plan updates, I'll certainly take them, or anything else for that matter.
Well, thank you. Yeah, there are a lot of behind the scenes efforts going on in the school district from our staff that goes unnoticed and not, and I guess sometimes unappreciated, but thank you for pointing that out and bringing it to our attention.
She will yell at me. She'll yell at me tomorrow.
Pass on our congratulations. Thank you. Okay, then we'll move into personnel actions, and Mrs. Matika, will you please take us through the personnel?
I will. Thank you, Mr. Jellicoe. Just a short agenda tonight with only 21 items, but I'm starting to sound like a broken record that it's bittersweet again because we have more retirements on our agenda. And I'll call your attention to the retirement of Richard Bondel, who's a groundskeeper and a utility worker after 33 years of employment in the district. And two instructional assistants, Colette Fogler, who's an instructional assistant at the middle school after 13 years of service, and Jen Sherman at Weisenberg after 32 years of service to the district. So drum roll for another total of 78 years of service to the district. So we will miss them at the end of this school year. And the other items are usual business items. I ask for your approval on this evening.
Okay, with that, I would ask for a motion to approve the personnel.
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Fatsinger,
Second.
second by Mrs. Height. Are there any comments or questions? Personnel. Hearing none, all those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carried. Thank you.
Thank you.
And moving into curriculum and building issues, I was going to take these all at once, but I guess we can just take them one at a time. First, calendars, which was discussed at the meeting, no additions to that.
There are no
At the
changes.
last workshop. The dental contract is routine renewal, and the attendance officers that are noted on the agenda need to be approved for that position. So I'd entertain a motion for all three of those items, 301, 02, and 03.
So moved.
Motion by Mrs. Cenobitis,
Second.
second by Mrs. Scheffler. Any comments or questions? Those items. Hearing none, all those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carried. And now we move into 3.04, and this is a first reading, so we don't have to do any action tonight, take any action tonight, but let's hear about the new curriculum documents that are in front of us.
Sure, thank you. We are presenting these listed documents today for first reading. And this is a culmination of our curriculum cycle process. They were all discussed already through our curriculum meeting that we had back in December, I believe it was. But before we talk specifically about the areas, I would first like to acknowledge all of our staff that have been involved in the curriculum revision process. Approximately 30 teachers have spent a lot of time and effort over the last year. They've researched best practices, they were analyzing and incorporating standards. They've suggested appropriate changes to the documents so that they're all user-friendly and for our staff, and that they all meet our specific needs here at Northwestern. Our building principals also have been very instrumental in taking a look at the documents, guiding our staff through the process so that, and also reviewing some of the changes that we have made as well. Also, just a reminder that these documents, if you look at them, they are not complete because the board actually will approve the written documents outlined, the objectives outlined in those documents after being on display for 30 days, public display. Other items are included in those documents. However, as you can imagine, since they are new, sometimes it's very difficult to say exactly what you're going to do before you actually go ahead and plan it out. So since a lot of these things have not been fully taught yet by our staff, we do allow them to add different suggested materials or activities or assessments after they have gone through the curriculum and started to teach it as well. So we don't require that those areas are to be completed upon approval of the documents, but they are to be filled in as they change. Also, as the teachers incorporate some of these new curriculum documents, they also identify different techniques. They identify what works well. Sometimes they try new things out. If they don't work well, then they change things as they go. So these adjustments are allowed annually, and typically I update the documents over the summer, as long as the objectives remain constant. So we're not changing what we teach. We're just changing sometimes the techniques that we're doing to teach it. The proposed curriculum documents are all currently found on our website for review. You will see, as I discussed in the Curriculum Council meeting back in December, there's a lot, basically K-12 English Language Arts are located on here. So you'll see a smattering of all of that. Plus there are some changes necessary to this middle school health and physical education curriculum documents because of schedule changes there. They had to incorporate some new objectives in there because they had extra time this year because of a schedule change. And then also there's a holdover from 2 years ago when we last approved curriculum in math. And that was the Algebra 2 applied Algebra 2, trigonometry curriculum at the high school. So that's just a holdover from that time. So, Please make sure that you take a look at the documents online. If there are any questions, please feel free to reach out to me.
Well, there's a lot of information here.
Yes.
And,
It was a long process.
yeah, and it's an important process, and it's one of the most important things that we do as board members, and that is to review and approve curriculum put together by our professionals. And, curriculum has been in the news a lot lately around the nation with school board meetings and parents, angry parents coming to meetings about what is being taught in the curriculum. And this is so important for us to make sure we know what is being taught in our schools by looking through these documents. And these documents are, it's like reading the Bible. I mean, a big book. There's a lot of information in here, but we need to become familiar with it, just peruse it. And I say this for the public, that the kinds of things that you're seeing on television, the social pressures that are coming into schools to do, some of these extreme things and CRT and all this other stuff is not in this curriculum. This curriculum isn't what you see on television on the nightly news here at Northwestern Lehigh. And that's always been the problem with, as long as I've been on this board, people see things on television about what's happening in schools around the nation, and they think that that's what's happening here at Northwestern, and it's not. So a lot of effort goes into preparing these guides. You can navigate through the website to get to all of them. And I encourage you to do that. And again, it's a lot of reading, but it's something that we need to be aware of as board members, and make sure that the public knows that we are looking at these things as well. And they know that we are teaching our kids what they want us to be teaching their kids through our professional staff. So-
Mr. Delacour, can I just add one other thing?
Yeah.
Also on our curriculum website, you will see the minutes from the last curriculum council meeting, which summarize all of the changes. So that might be also a good document for you to take a look at, to peruse, to see what the changes are and what some of the things are that the staff had identified as needing to be changed.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up too, because I was at that last curriculum meeting. I think Mrs. Sinovitis was there too, remotely. Who else was there? I thought maybe somebody, I thought one of the other board members was listening in.
Mr. Weiser?
Todd, it may have been Todd, but that was a good meeting, and you got to listen to the teachers who are preparing these documents and preparing the curriculum and talking about what they're putting in and why, and what the changes are that have to be made. These are not the massive changes that we're bringing in here. They're tweaking it to make it better based on the experience that they have, based on assessments like testing, standardized testing, and that kind of thing that goes into evaluating the effectiveness of the curriculum. So yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. That's another step in the process of improving our curriculum. So with that, are there any questions about this before we move on? We don't have to take action on this. We have a month to review it, right, 30 days. And encourage the public as well to go into the website and look at these curriculum guides that are out in the open. And that's another law that was just passed, I think, too, wasn't it? Attorney Moyer, some school districts did not have their curriculums available to the public for review on the school websites. And we have always been out in the open. We've always been transparent with our curriculum to the best extent possible, with first paper books before we got technology, but now online it's available for anybody who wants to take a look at this. So there are no other comments or no other discussion. Thank you. Thank you for presenting this, and we'll look at it for the next 30 days at least. And we'll move on to policy. We have 3 new policies tonight, Dr. Smalley.
Yes, sir. And there have been no suggested changes and or questions to these three policies, as well as the policies for second reading for your approval tonight, in addition to the rescind policy.
So no comments on the first reading. Second reading was it was discussed in the workshop and has been out in the open for the last 30 days for review. And I would entertain a motion at this time to approve 4.02, which are the two policies, 003 and 004, and rescind policy 009.
Motion to approve.
Motion by Mrs. Sheffler,
Second.
second by Mrs. Sanovitis. Any comments or questions about those policies? Okay, hearing none, all those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. And that motion carries. Thank you, Doctor. Next item on the agenda comes under district finances, and we have items that were vetted at the workshop, and the first is the intermediate unit student driver education program agreement. And I would entertain a motion to approve that.
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Fatsinger,
Second.
second by Dr. Hunsiker. Comments or questions? The rule, standing rule. All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carried. And we have a settlement agreement that is redacted in our agenda for all the confidentiality that we have to maintain on this. And this is 75 hours compensatory education and lawyers fee, potential lawyers fee. So this is all vetted in an executive session because of the confidentiality of the student. So with that, you have it in front of you. With that, I would entertain a motion to approve that settlement agreement as it is written. Motion by Mrs. Sheffler,
Second.
second by Mr. Hernandez. Are there any comments, questions, anything to add?
I don't have anything.
Okay. Hearing none, all those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carried. And we come to the reports. Is there anything you'd like to point out on the reports this evening?
Nothing additional from what I brought up at the workshop. Earned income tax still running great. If anyone has any questions on any of the reports or the bills, I'd be happy to answer them for you.
Any questions on the reports, which was vetted at the workshop as well? Hearing none, entertain a motion to receive the reports.
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Fassinger,
Second.
second by Dr. Hunsiker. Any comments or questions?
I think we both should. Rachel.
Who was the second?
Second.
Mrs. Height was the second at the reports. Okay, so we have a motion and a second.
I just thought you shook your head like.
All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carried. And finally, approval to pay the bills, which was vetted at the workshop. Are there any questions or anything you'd like to talk about the bills, Brian?
Nope, nothing additional. Thank
Okay,
you.
entertain a motion to pay the bills.
Pay the bill. So moved.
Motion by Mr. Patsy,
Second.
second by Dr. Hunsiker. Got you that time. Any comments or questions? Hearing none, all those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carried. And moving into other reports, we have the enrollment report. Is there anything, Mrs. Holman, that you'd like to point out on that, or any questions about the enrollment report?
There is not. If there's any questions, I'll certainly take them.
Questions? Seeing none, so we'll accept the enrollment report and move to foundation report. And we have with us President of our Northwestern Lehigh Education Foundation, DJ Walbert, and Mrs. Sitzel, our representative to the foundation. So let's start with Mrs. Stitzel.
I have attached to the agenda tonight the advertisement for the Tiger Run and Fun Walk, which will be held Saturday, May 28th at Onalani Park. This is an annual fundraising event for the foundation. You can register, actually, if you go onto the document and click on the to register visit, you can actually click on it and go right to the registration page. This is just one of the, actually, this is one of the last ones that they will have for the school year. They typically have one in another event in the summer, which is their golf tournament. Mr. Walbert, if you would like to add anything? The report?
We always have lots of events. We've got the play shooting fall as well. We're going to be choosing a raffle winner for the Disney trip tomorrow. So if anybody's still interested in going to Disney with their family and doing the trip, please go to our website tonight. So we're always doing things like that. I'd say the other thing is we had our annual strategy session this last weekend for the foundation, which is a great opportunity for us to take a look at how we can improve our operations and our efficiency and effectiveness to bring in funds to the school district, as we did last month with a very sizable funding check, I think for $128,000, which is only part of what we'll be doing this school year. We actually have some more money that will be coming as well. So look forward to continuing the work, and we'll be meeting tomorrow with the administration. So,
John?
rain or shine.
Thank you, Mrs. Stitzel, and thank you, DJ Walbert, for joining us this evening. And as always, thank you for all the effort you put in to making this school better through your organization and the foundation. We're
I
blessed to have
appreciate
you.
it. It's a great team effort by the entire foundation. That's great volunteers.
Please pass that on. Blessed to have you in our community. Thank you. All right, moving on to committee reports. First, we'll have the IU, Mrs. Sanamitis.
I have nothing. Meeting is scheduled for next Monday.
You guys aren't helping me get to 8 o'clock.
It's still on track for 8 o'clock.
All right.
Ryan,
No, I'm sorry. That's fine.
I can
All right,
tell so.
then LCTI. Mr. Phil, Mr. Passer.
Last meeting, we had a discussion about optional masking. And I do apologize because I'm not 100% sure on the date. As of the meeting, there were 2 schools that were still masked, fully masked. I think the date was March 5th that they were going to go mask optional. I think that was the date, but that was supposed to happen. So, yeah.
So they weren't going to unmask until all of them were unmasked. Is that-
There was some discussion to that, but they decided to make it March 5th. Pretty sure that was the date. They did it. That was it.
Okay. Thank you. The report, the president's report from L-Tri-C is on your device, on the agenda. And is there anything from Rec Commission this evening?
I'll add comment. We have a date for Night in the Country. It is August 20th, and the rain date is August 21st. We're currently in discussions with the fireworks vendor. Prices have gone up significantly, so we're looking at a couple different options for the fireworks. And I'll just make a comment that there are some board members who don't want to pay anything for fireworks, so.
Rec board members.
Yeah, rec board members. So we have a little bit of a tiff going on at the board. Some are all in, some are not. So more to come on that, but we did set a date, and there we go.
Okay. Thanks for representing us. So I get the big bucks. All right. Moving on to old business. There is no old business on the agenda, nor new business. Is there any old business or new business from any board member? Move into communications. Eisenhower, are there any communications to the board? And at this time, we'll offer courtesy the floor once again to anyone who would like to address the board. And would ask you to please rise and state your name and the township you live in. Yes, sir.
Kevin Bernard, Edward Township. I just want to say it's great to see everyone smiles. That's the first time that we've been asked this. It's great to see you guys.
Thanks for coming. Thanks, Kevin. Anyone else? Nope. Thank you for coming and sticking it out in this long meeting with us this evening. We'll move into administrative and building sharing. And Dr. Cisnelli, will you please lead us through that?
Yes, sir. Mr. Gibler.
Yes, good evening, members of the board, members of the administrative team, and members of the public for joining this evening. I'd just like to celebrate and report that our Science Olympiad team at the high school is doing exceptionally well. Their most recent competition, they did earn the position of first place in an online competition that competed against schools across the state at Pittsburgh University, again in the online format, but they do have the regional competition tomorrow. And it's a special pleasure for me, being a former STEM teacher, to see those students staying after daily, truly, to prepare their individual projects for these competitions. And the work that they're putting in is paying off when they get the competition. So again, kudos to those students and to their advisors, Mrs. Ake and Mr. Timlin. Great job.
Mrs. Pulley.
Hi, good evening. Not a whole lot to share from the elementary. We are excited for some field trips and other spring activities coming up. And we are also preparing for kindergarten screening to welcome our newest Tigers.
Mrs. Burlett.
Good evening. To add to what Maria said, Weisenberg Elementary will be holding our family fun night on Saturday evening, starting at 4:30. It's the first one in 2 years, I believe. So we are very excited to bring this event back. We have many wonderful raffle prizes or auction prizes coming in. So if you're free, come on out to Weisenberg on Saturday and join us. Thank you.
Mrs. Evans.
Hi, I don't have anything this evening. Thank you.
Mrs. Yadish.
Good evening. I'm very excited to share some exciting news for our class of 2022 this evening. We are proud to announce that we are naming a graduation date finally, and we plan to hold our commencement ceremony this year on Friday, June 3rd at Tiger Stadium beginning at 7 p.m. We do have a few rain dates set as well. As soon as I am finished on this meeting, I will be sending out that message to all of our seniors, our staff, and our families of our seniors. So we're very excited that we're starting to plan for graduation, getting ourselves back into the groove of doing things on a normal fashion this year. And congratulations to the seniors. Your graduation day is coming up very quickly. Thank you.
Or excuse me, I'm way over there, and see behind there. Mrs. Stitzel.
I have nothing further. Thank you.
Mrs. Teagle.
Mrs. Holman stole my thunder with the certificate with Mrs. Staggerwall in the business office. So I also wanted to congratulate her on her certificate.
Nothing further. Thank you.
Well, I would like, I'd like to applaud Mrs. Stitzel and all those involved in the curriculum writing process. Evaluating and updating the curriculum is a tremendous undertaking and not one we take lightly here. So thank you, Mrs. Stitzel, for all your leadership, through this important process.
Nothing further. I mean, Dr. Snowick said it best. I said to Mrs. Stitzel, it's a whole lot of work that comes together in a nice little package for you to review, but a lot of work behind the scenes to get them there. I agree. I do think we're gonna get Scott on the phone. Yes, you want him on now?
Talking to him right now. I just let him know that we'll be calling in. So he's pulling over right now. He's on the turnpike. So maybe give him another minute or two to find an exit.
want to do board member sharing first?
I'm gonna get them all while you're doing that.
You can, or you can get minutes of both. We're gonna do board member sharing, so they're gonna go around either way.
Technology makes a whole new set of challenges. doesn't it? Okay, let's do board member sharing until we get Scott on the line. And let's start with Mr. Hernandez.
I don't really have.
Slow,
so thank you.
Could you say it slow if I know what to say?
Mrs. Sheffer.
Yeah, I think my comment, Leanne and Amy, it was timely for tonight as I sat with my incoming ninth grader to register for classes. It is really a really comprehensive outline for parents to be able to go through that process and choose classes. And I just think that we're really fortunate for what we do offer our kids here. I think that the classes definitely change with the times and are super relevant to what the kids need to know for jobs that we don't even necessarily know are out there. So just from a personal perspective, it was a really rewarding experience to go through that as a mom, again, 4 years later or 5 years later. So thank you for that.
Thank you. Dr. Hunsaker.
I just wanted to recognize the instructional assistants. I think that they've all been doing a fantastic job, and I know that we recognize teachers a lot, and I think that they're fantastic too. But the instructional assistants, they've really been stepping up, and I know that they've been helping teachers and helping our students. They've been covering classes, especially, without having, a substitute all the time. And it's been challenging during COVID for them to manage that. So I just wanted to take a moment just to recognize them for all of their hard work and their effort. So thank you.
Thank you. Mrs. Zenowaitis.
I had the pleasure of with Mr. Delaker speaking at the PTO meeting via Zoom, taking my lunch and zooming in, and what a gracious group. And I sometimes think we forget all that it takes to make things happen, not only from people that work here and people who sit here, but the parents who are really committed to making this the best place possible. So I wanted to say thanks for the invite, and then thanks for what they do.
Thank you. Thank you for bringing that up. Okay, Becky, Mrs. Height.
I wanted to follow up on what Mrs. Burlett said about Family Fun Night this weekend. The committee's really excited to get back into it, and the live auction starts at 5:15. Our Weisenberg Volunteer Fire Department donated a fire truck ride for up to 4 people that you can come bid on. We have about 80 items in the silent auction right now to bid on, and around 100 for the children's auction, so it should be a great night.
Nothing in this.
Nothing in this. Terry Moyer, anything? Okay.
Everybody
I'm
else.
sorry, I thought really
Everybody
hard
else
about
said
it.
Well, I got a couple of things. Thank you for bringing that up to the PTO meeting. And again, we talked about the behind the scenes efforts that go here in the school, and the same with the parents. We hear Mrs. Burlett, we hear all the principals talk about the PTOs and what they're doing. And there's a lot of work. And you know that personally from being on the committee. Behind pulling all these things together. Mrs. Holman was there. I think there were 8 of us at that PTO meeting at Weisberg, which is an eye-opener, and it was a pleasure. Thank you. I just want to mention, I talked before about the contest we're having here in the school to name the eagle that's going on the Veterans Memorial in Onalani Park. And we have over 80 names that have been submitted. And we are going to decide, as the committee is going to decide on Saturday, what the name is going to be for that eagle, which will be engraved in a granite block that he's going to be sitting on 6 foot high up in the air on a stone pier. So that's exciting to have that many kids. And a couple of parents came up and said they were so happy that the committee has brought the school, the community, specifically the elementary kids in our district, to get involved with this memorial project. My face is red today because I was out in the sun all day watching them bring the granite in and setting it in the memorial for the benches and the bases for the 11 monuments that have the 2,400 names on it. So that's a neat project to have the kids involved. And I think that's all I can drag it out with, but if Scott's with us. And after Scott speaks, we've been advised from by our solicitor that we will have another courtesy of floor for you to comment after we hear Scott Scherer, who is our financial advisor with PFN, and is going to talk to us about the financing of some of the projects that we were looking at in the facility master plan.
So while he's getting Scott on the phone, if I could just remind you from the workshop meeting, we reviewed a number of master facilities projects, which obviously were discussed earlier. The other one that was brought up is one that you have talked about before, the middle school heating system, which we did have issues with. I think it is 3 years ago now with the mold issue at the middle school. And so that is about a $9.1 million project that, Mr. Lizer, I think, was the one who said, like, we can't not talk about that when we're talking about these items. And so at the time, I believe the board requested to hear from Scott, is this a good time to look at financing with how the interest rates are or not? And so you asked to hear Scott come to say, what would it be if we wanted to combine the middle school heat, the HVAC, I should say heat, all HVAC, as well as the projects that you looked at last month, and what would that look like if you wish to do a borrowing? If you recall, if we did the projects we were talking about though in the last meeting, without the heating, the HVAC project, we were recommending taking it out of fund balance, but you certainly can't do that if you wish to do and move forward with the HVAC project in the middle school. So Scott has prepared a packet that's on your agenda, and as you heard, he is on the road from Westchester, so I trust he will be just as good on the phone as he is in person, but we will miss his face. So Scott, I just gave them the intro that Ryan and you and I talked about on the phone in terms of what they wanted to talk with you about potential borrowing options and whether or not this is a good time to borrow or not.
Sure. Well, yeah, good evening, everyone. Sorry, I was just running a little bit late from my other meeting, so hopefully you can hear me all okay. Does everybody have that handout by any chance?
Yes, and Scott, if you just tell us what page you want us to be on, and we'll get there. It's up on our display now.
Perfect, thank you. Yeah, why don't we just go to page 1, just to kind of get ourselves reacclimated a little bit. So as far as interest rates go, well, today was an interesting day in the interest rate market. But if we just kind of go back to sort of pre-pandemic, that's kind of where I like to start the time frame nowadays. So basically, we saw March of 2020, spring of 2020, rates really spiked up when the pandemic first hit. Then we started to see that correct itself real quickly. And come summer of 2020, we hit our all-time lows in the market, which was great. And then throughout 2021, rates stayed pretty low. And now, and I'll get to it here in a page or two in a chart, but since like middle part of January, because of all the international stuff that's going on with the Ukraine, Russia issues, the gas prices, kind of you name it, has sparked the fears of inflation, and we've seen long-term tax-exempt rates shoot up about 0.5%. That's a pretty big increase over a short amount of time. Now, all things equal, and again, I'll get to it here shortly, we're still at a good time to be borrowing. About 90, if you go back, it's like 30 or 40 years, about 90% of the time, interest rates are higher or were higher than where they are right now. So, again, just to be fully honest, we're not at the all-time lows that we've been experiencing for about a year or so, but we're still in the big scheme of things looking real good from at least from the absolute rate levels, and is it a good time or not to borrow. Again, there is volatility in the market, but more than likely we're going to see all this settle out here in the near term. And so I think we all heard today that the Fed increased rates 25 basis points, which in some ways is kind of a good thing, because now you should hopefully start earning a little bit more, although Northwestern, you have had some real good investment rates that you were able to enjoy more than I think a lot of districts out there. But what the Fed's doing is good, because now you will start to be able to earn a little bit more on your fund balance and, you know, some of your other reserves. But the question is going to be then, what impact does that have on long-term borrowing rates, which is what we really care about for this discussion. And the answer at the moment is still kind of unknown. Time will tell. I mean, the Fed's expected to increase rates, you know, another handful of times this year. And so then what do long-term rates do? Do they stay about where they are? Do they go up or do they go down? And we've kind of seen this happen over the course of the last 20 or so years that I've been doing it, where we just got to kind of let things kind of roll out a little bit longer to get a better feel. But again, overall right now, rates are still good. So as far as the project, staying on page 1, or I guess it's page 2, the topics for discussion, you know, again, the discussion that I've had with your administration is potentially looking at, you know, 12 million plus or so of various projects related to the middle school. Whether or not you borrow all that or use some cash, you know, that's for later discussions to kind of get in the weeds if you decide to move forward. For the schedule, the sample debt service schedule that we put in this handout, we were assuming that the financing would occur in early 2023. And that's not, I'm not saying that's the perfect time to do it. It's just for this illustration, that's what I assumed. If you decide you want to move forward and do something this summer, we can surely do that. If you want to wait till next summer, we can surely do that as well. But I just picked that just as a starting point for discussion purposes, because as I think most of you have all heard me say over the years, when you go to borrow on a tax exempt basis, which is what you want to do to achieve the lowest rate, and you're borrowing for new money purposes, new capital purposes, you need to meet certain IRS tests, reasonable expectations tests, which is what I have in section 3 on page 2, which for us to move forward with the borrowing on a tax exempt basis, we need to prove to the IRS that there's reasonable expectations that the district will spend at least 85% of the proceeds within 3 years. Now, if you don't, you know, it's not that big a deal. We basically just need to, at that point, at the end of the 3-year period, restrict the account that the money's in, that it can't earn too much interest. It really can't have a interest earnings rate higher than the borrowing rate. So it's called yield restriction and arbitrage. It gets kind of in the weeds. But that's really the key that we would need to prove to bond counsel, that you have that reasonable expectation test and you meet it, then we can borrow it. So based on the discussions I had with the administration, it seems like that, you know, that probably is not an issue. Then the other thing, you know, that I just kind of wanted to bring up in section 4, that by borrowing for new money purposes for capital projects, it does utilize a portion of the district's legal borrowing capacity, which you're in good shape. But I'm just going back from the last one that we did from the last transaction, that there's a calculation that we need to do whenever a school district borrows funds here in Pennsylvania. And we basically look at your last 3 years of revenues and average those together. And so we get to the legal limit that it's basically 250% of, or I'm sorry, 225% of your average revenues over the past 3 years. So in that section 4, where you see the row that says net non-electoral debt limit 225% of borrowing base, so your legal limit is about 101 million. It's actually a little bit bigger now because again, this is a little bit stale. So your revenues probably grew to your new budget year, and you've paid off some debt, which we'll get to. So your legal limit's a little over 100 million. You had about 42 million of net debt outstanding. So your remaining capacity is about 58 million. So long story short, just wanted to make you aware that you're in good shape. You know, if you do decide you want to borrow for all these projects or a portion, you know, you're going to be at around 50% of your borrowing capacity, give or take. Actually, it's going to be a little bit less probably because of the years that have gone by and the calculation changing a little bit. So all in all, again, still very, very good. Very, very, very doubtful that it would have any impact on the district's credit rating. You know, all the stuff we'd have to disclose to them, to the rating agency. But you know, you act in a very kind of systematic way, good financial management tools, very fiscally responsible, that we always have those discussions with the rating agency. So again, I don't foresee any issue at all with the credit rating aspect of things if you do decide you want to move forward. And then the last section on this page, you heard me talk a lot over the years about bank qualified debt versus non-bank qualified debt. And that magic threshold per calendar year is $10 million. So you get a clean slate every January 1. And there's certain caveats and carve outs and exceptions to the rule. But basically, if you borrow under $10 million, your debt would be considered bank qualified. And if your debt that you borrow, your issue would be over 10 million, it'd be non-bank qualified. Basically, all that means is, and it varies depending on the market, but typically a bank qualified transaction, meaning under 10 million, will have a slightly lower interest rate. Now, again, it fluctuates. Sometimes that margin is really almost nothing. That we haven't seen too often, but there's been a couple points in my career where I've seen that margin be basically zero. Usually it's around 25 to 30 basis points, so about 0.25%. So we're not talking huge amounts, but still, when you're applying that to millions of dollars of potential borrowing, that definitely adds up. So it's still very important. But we just want to make that clear that if you do borrow $12.5 million, that would be non-bank qualified if you do it all at one time. And, so you get the slightly higher interest rate, or, if you wanted to do something less, borrow 10 million and use cash for some of it, there's options there to kind of work through that. But, again, just wanted to kind of plant that seed again, and I'm sure we'll talk about it in the future if you decide to move forward. But that's just that 10 million, because we're talking about a potential various projects totaling over 10 million. I just want to make that clear to everybody again of those differences. And then turning the page, I guess that's page 3. I've already hit on this, but again, just to sort of set the stage on where the market is, the bottom chart, so there's 3 charts on this page. If you go to the bottom one, this is a 10-year municipal index that goes back to early 2020, and it just kind of reiterates everything I said before about the big spike in rates in the spring of 2020 when COVID first hit, and then kind of staying pretty low all the way through. And then basically since mid-January of this year, we've seen this uptick in the rates. That then if you go to the middle chart, here, that just goes back then to 1993, so it gives you a little wider picture. But again, overall, things still look good when you go back in history. Page 4, we won't get into the nuts and bolts of this, but it's something that we use internally a lot when we're looking at which debt to potentially refinance for the district, or if you do need to borrow for new money purposes, for new capital needs, that we want to make sure we structure your overall debt. Well, we want to structure this new financing such that it fits well within your overall debt portfolio. So just the one thing I want to touch on page 4, if we go to, say, column 11, kind of on the bottom, sort of the bottom half of the page, which says your total local effort. So total local effort is your principal you pay on a fiscal year basis, plus your interest that you pay on a fiscal year basis, less any state reimbursement you get on some of your bond issues, which you get a little bit. You get a few cents on the dollar on some of your transactions. And so your annual run rate is about 3.7 million, 3.8 million, give or take a little bit, with this calculation. And you can see there, basically, there's a big drop off in the 34, 35 year, down from basically at 3.8 million down to about 1 million, and then your debt disappears. So we use this then to make sure that we're structuring your debt legally for federal purposes and for state purposes. And that kind of then takes us to the last page, which is really the most important page, I think, on here, that if you did on page 5, up top, in box number 1, borrow basically 12.5 million, we would structure it as a 15-year financing, and we call it a wraparound, which we've done before for the district, where there's very little principal being repaid back in the first, say 12 years or so until your debt drops off, and then we start layering in all the principal on this new transaction after your other debt, again, tapers off, so that you're now level in column 5. So column 5 is really the important one, around $4.3 million. So right now, again, your existing local effort is around 3.7 million, give or take a little bit, 3.7, 3.8. And if you borrow 12.5 million, kind of all at one time with this structure, which is the least impactful to your overall budget, you go from that 3.7 or 8 million to about 4.2 or 4.3 million. So you need to find room in the budget to be able to absorb in column 4 about $500,000 of new revenues to pay for this additional debt service. But you see in column 4 that towards the end, those last 4 years, there's a bigger payments that the district would need to make. But that again fits around where your existing debt drops off. So in column 5, you're either level or decreasing, which is what the state needs to make sure that we're following those rules. So that's really kind of at a high level, and we're happy to dive into more detail and come back and give you more information and have more dialogue. But kind of big picture is if you borrow 12.5 million at today's rates with a little bit of cushion in them, we were just a little bit conservative in these rates, you're looking at about $500,000 of interest expense per year until we get to the big years out there. So with that, happy to answer any questions that you may have, or if you would like to see any additional scenarios, happy to do that for you.
Scott, this is Jen. I think one of the questions the board asked at the last meeting was the advantages and disadvantages of potentially taking out $3.5 million out of fund balance versus the borrowing in terms of the interest rates and how taking $3.5 million out of fund balance to pay for the projects, which is obviously the other alternative, would have an impact on all of those things, including our rating.
Yeah, great question. So, we're having this discussion with a lot of our clients right now, given the fact of what the Fed is now doing with increasing short-term rates. So, before you were not able to earn a lot on your fund balance, maybe 0.5% or 1/4% or somewhere around there, or a lot of places were actually a lot less than that. But now if the Fed's going to be increasing rates 5 or 6 times over the course of the year, we could be up to, back to like 2%, 2.5% type investment rates on this kind of money. So then the question that comes into play is, okay, well, and this is not just Northwestern Indiana School District, this is a lot of entities across the state and across the nation. Well, if we were going to contribute some cash to the project, do we still want to do that, or do we want to maybe split it down the middle, maybe use some of the cash, half of our cash, instead of the full amount, maybe use half of it for the project and borrow the other half? There's kind of options like that a lot of places are considering right now, because now you're able to start earning on that investment balance. And if you go to borrow, your borrowing rate overall is still pretty good. It's still going to be in that 2.5% range, something along those lines, based on today's rates as well. So there's that kind of analysis that needs to be done as far as what are the kind of the quantitative factors involved with the kind of the opportunity cost of using your money, not realizing those interest earnings. As far as the credit rating, that's where we may see more of an impact. I'm not saying the rating agency is going to downgrade the district for using $3.5 million of cash, but it's definitely going to be, I think, a longer conversation with the rating agency as far as, why and how much we still have remaining, and are you comfortable with that amount? But, typically once you start drawing on reserves, drawing on fund balance, it does raise the eyebrows of the rating agency, and they may potentially put the district on like a negative watch initially to see if that continues. Or, like I said, there's a slight chance they may downgrade, but that's something that we could explore with the rating agency and start kind of putting feelers out if that's a path that the district wants to kind of lean towards. So those, I think, are the sort of the two main discussion points with using, say, the $3.5 million. Is number one, the impact of, the loss of interest earnings on that money over the long term versus the interest expense that you'd be incurring if you borrow the money, and then any implications on the credit rating if you used the cash.
There is no decision on this tonight. This is just one more piece of information, but certainly we have Scott on the phone. If anyone has any questions or things that he didn't talk about or he didn't run that you would like, I mean, Scott has been around and been with us for a very long time. And as those of you who know Scott, he knows the market really well and has always advised us really well. It is probably the most volatile time we'll ask him to advise us. But certainly if you have any questions for Scott, now would be the time.
Yeah, happy to follow back up again. Again, apologize for not being there this evening. But if you did decide, just a little bit more food for thought. That if you did decide to borrow the full amount, the $12.5 million in this illustration, a bond issue is going to be more than likely the most efficient way to do it, which the district clearly has experience with doing bond issues over the years. If you just decided that I just want to do the $3.5 million project for now. That's important. Let's get that done, and then we can reevaluate some of these other things later. Then we would do what we've done before with these kind of smaller. They're not small, but smaller than $12.5 million. We go something less than $5 million to borrow. Then we probably do like a dual track option where we look at bank loans. Obviously, your local bank there has really partnered well with the district over the years and has provided some good loans, and currently one outstanding with the district. So we would look at maybe a bank loan for that, or still maybe a bond issue. It just kind of depends on the facts and circumstances. But you could borrow just the $3.5 million. You could borrow the full amount. Or you could borrow something in between. So the financing vehicle may just be a little bit different depending on how much you would want to borrow. But the market is still good in both of those, bank loan market and the bond market. It's just there's a bit of volatility going on right at the moment. But again, that's just something that we help guide you through the process to make sure you're still getting the best overall financing package.
Any questions? This is drinking from the fire hose tonight, I'm sure, but it's complicated financing, but Scott, I have a question. This is Bill.
Yes, Bill.
Years ago, going back to what you said earlier about having to spend, the IRS says you have to spend 85% in 3 years. And years ago, there was, this district took advantage of that positive arbitrage where the interest earned is greater than the interest that's paid. And I think we were allowed to go to $1 million put $1 million in positive arbitrage. Is that no longer an option?
Well, it's just the market really isn't there for that. That was more back when, say, the borrowing rate might have been 2% or so, 3%, but the investment rates were 4%, 5%, 6%, or more. That's where, if the start of the line right, you could realize the positive arbitrage. Legally, because you would be considered a small issuer, believe it or not, we're still talking about $12.5 million potentially. In the eyes of the IRS, you'd be considered a small issuer, and basically they say that if you borrow less than $15 million in a calendar year, that you could, if you meet these reasonable expectation tests and everything else, you could legally keep the positive arbitrage, assuming the different conditions are met. But we're just not really in a market right now, and we haven't been for a while, where you could practically actually experience it, meaning your investment rate is going to be a fair amount higher than your borrowing rate.
All right.
We may get to that. We may get to that day again at some point. That's one of the things that it's hard to say. If the Fed keeps increasing short-term rates to kind of sway away inflation, if the short-term rates go up and the long-term rates or even midterm rates, like the 10-year rates and the 15-year rates and the 30-year rates, there's a chance that they could actually go down. And then we'd be in what's called an inverted yield curve situation, which means the shorter the duration, the higher the rate. It sounds convoluted, but we've definitely been in some of these inverted yield curve times over the years. And that's maybe more of an opportunity to realize a positive arb because you're borrowing, at the longer end of the yield curve and you're investing at the shorter end. So we just got to see how this market plays out to see if that's a practical option. But legally, based on the amount that we're talking about, you legally be able to do it, but I'm just not sure the market's going to be able to actually do that.
Thank you.
Yep.
When does the TIF run out?
I think we're
Remember
8
12
years
ago?
out. I think we're 8 years out.
It was 25 or 20?
It was 20.
20, so we got 12 years to go, which is.
No, I
34.
think we're 12 years in, 8 years left.
Eight years to go, which would be 30.
Let me double check this. Luann's looking at it.
I think it's 7. I don't know why I did that.
But we're
Time
still
flies.
keeping this local effort for our debt service right around 4 million, which is where it's been for, forever.
Can I just explain the TIF for the new board members?
Oh, I'm
So
sorry,
that's all right. So the TIF is a 20-year agreement for essentially the warehouses in Weisenberg Township, where the district entered into an agreement with the township and the county. And it's a tax incremental financing is what TIF stands for. And that means after 20 years, we will get back the full tax from what those warehouses provide. We got interim real estate taxes during the years those buildings were built and sold. But we provided all 3 entities have to agree to provide for infrastructure improvements which are necessary or the warehouses would not have come in. So the county, the township, and the school district agreed, and thus we agreed to a 20-year difference in taxes. When Mr. Delacour is saying how long till the TIF, meaning we are, I think, 12 years in, although Ryan, I think, is looking it up. And so that means we are 8 years out. So the district has always talked about, the difference in our expenditures and revenues. At what point do you hedge against when that influx of revenue is going to come back in? Because it will be a stark difference when that happens. And so I think that's why he's asking, how do you wrap your debt in combination with an influx of dollars coming in 8 years kind of thing?
Yeah, right now, we're getting only 50% of the revenues that property value generates or is assessed at. So we're only getting 50% of what we're going to get when this TIF is expired, which is something that we can look forward to and work into that wraparound financing for the debt service that Scott was talking about. That's something you can look at it, in fact. But it still looks like the debt service is maintaining pretty constantly what we've been at in our budgeting for the last many years.
That's part of, so that's what the wrap Scott talked about. So when he mentions the wrap, part of the wrap is to make your debt consistent over time. So there's not large fluctuations in, I'm gonna call it your mortgage for lack of a better word. All of your debt service combined, we can budget a steady amount. So when you enter new debt, like the one that you see, the last, all on page 4 are all the issuances. So when we talk about when does the next one come up for call, Scott and I talked about this briefly on the phone. That's where Scott will come to you with some ideas about how to refinance that. And that's been when Scott's been here and has been able to save us lots and lots of money when we've been able to refinance some of those that have call dates on them. The one that Scott talked about, which was the last project, is in column 10, which is the 2021 New Tripoli he mentioned earlier, but it's scheduled in such a way that your payment annually is the same. Scott, you're welcome to add to any of that if you like, because I know enough to speak.
No, you did perfect. That was excellent. The only thing I would add in column 6, as far as like future refinancing opportunities, column 6 kind of on the bottom, where it's the 2018 bonds, shows that they're callable in August of 2023, which sounds super far away, but we could actually kind of start having those discussions probably like January or February of next year. So there's IRS restrictions on how far in advance you can refinance debt, but that's kind of your next opportunity. And we'll just have to see where interest rates are at that point in time. So hopefully in 2023 and 2024, there are a couple bites at the apple to maybe save a little bit by refinancing with the 18 issue, and the 19 issue, and the 19A.
Jen, in regards to TIF, Leslie says she takes 7 or 8 years, so we're both right.
I'm close.
In there, yeah, 7 or 8 years.
Entered into it in August 2011.
Yeah,
Yep, that sounds right.
I was guessing, I'm guesstimating.
I have the board minutes on.
Yeah, I was trying to find it, I just couldn't find it fast enough.
So what's the next step now we want to take as a board? We got to talk about this at the workshop. We have to decide whether or not these projects that like Mr. Hill pointed out to us are the things that we want to do and prioritize. And we got to look at how it could be financed if we choose to do that. And weigh all of these pros and cons, like the HVAC. When we first looked at that, how many years ago? It was 6 million.
Yeah.
And now we're talking 9 million. And back then, we didn't have the inflation and all the other considerations that we're looking at right now either. But, and we all know historically with with what we picked up doing these projects, as if you put them off, it costs more money. So these are all considerations that we have to think about and discuss. So we're gonna put this on the workshop.
Yeah, what will be on the workshop will be the contracts. So when we talked at workshop, and I think there was 2 paths that we talked about at workshop. If there's something you absolutely don't support, whether it's line item or whether it's full project, we want to know now or then, because you don't want to pay to design a project that you have no intentions of proceeding with. If there were questions at the workshop, for example, the stage rigging was a question, like, can you reuse the stage rigging? To date, we haven't contracted with any professionals to go inspect that to make that decision. So if there are things that you wish, can we reuse that? Can we save some money? Can we do something a little different in terms of how to save money? The next step would be that you have to contract with books and you have to contract with LA5 to do some of those inspections and designs. So I think if there's something you absolutely don't support in terms of the project, that's what we want to talk about at the workshop meeting in April. So that we don't design something and put money into something that you have no intentions of proceeding with. But if there are other things like, can we do something a little differently? Can we not do that? Can we reuse that? Those are things like they have to get in there and inspect it to be able to even answer those questions for you, which they came and presented their plan, but you have not contracted with them for any services at this point. So your next point would be workshop and then approval at April 20th for those 2 professional services. Mr. Oaks, did I miss anything?
No, perfect.
So as far as Scott is concerned online, are there any other questions about financing that you can think about before we cut him off and put him back on the road?
I mean, the reason we brought them as the board, I think the question, I think Mr. Hernandez mentioned it, it's this gamble of, is the money better in the bank in terms of interest rates, spending versus you losing some of our borrowing capacity and our credit rating? Are the interest rates low enough to borrow the 3.5, take it out of fund balance, or borrow more than that? The HVAC project that I think Mr. Lizer brought up during the last meeting can't proceed without a borrowing. And so if you wish to, like, I think you said we continue to kick the can down the road about fixing the HVAC, or we're not fixing, replacing the HVAC. If you wish to do the HVAC, it will involve a borrowing. And is now the time to do that based on the interest rates. That's for the board to decide.
Any other questions for Scott? Thank you, Scott.
Thank you, Scott.
Yep, you bet. If you think of anything else, you want to see or analyze, happy to provide it for you or come back to another meeting. So yeah, I appreciate you reaching out this evening.
Thank you. Safe trip home.
You bet. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.
So. Just say at the workshop meeting, we go through our list of I guess my concern is, I feel like we would, if we're gonna borrow, we gotta do it sooner than later. with the rates going up, they're gonna continue to go up, and I think in 2 months, we could be over 2. You know, it might be 2.1, 2.2, and we're just wasting a little bit more money. Would it be possible to make some sort of decision in April?
Tomorrow, I'll ask Scott the turnaround time on it. I mean, the only thing you're up against, and I'm gonna ask Mr. Oaks if when he got the updated estimate from McClure, they answered this. So Scott said 85% has to be spent in 3 years. I think 100% has to be spent within 5. And so when we originally talked to Shane, if you recall, when, for those of you who were here for one of the renditions of the HVAC project with the, I'm gonna call them the refrigerators in the corner, it was a long lead time then. And that was well before COVID and well before any of the supply chain issues. So I'm pretty certain they probably could get it in 3 years, but I don't know if Shane gave an update in terms of
They
the
would
lead
estimate-
time.
They would estimate the summer of 23 to start. Pull the trigger.
So you want to know from Scott, could you pull the trigger sooner than later and still use, I'm gonna say hold the money, keep the money to be used in the summer of 23? Is that your question?
Yeah. No.
No, I will get you an answer if he doesn't answer
That's
right away.
something to consider.
Right.
In the overall decision. Any other questions? Any other concerns?
I actually have one just question, and I don't know if I brought it up at the workshop. Is there a number, figure of how much gas, like how much gas is it gonna are we gonna need to use in order for the gas tank to pay itself back? You know what I mean?
We did not do that calculation because that is not the purpose. It was not intended to be able to pay it back. I could try to do it. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm just trying to get our costs, like how long are we in? And I know that's not, I understand that's not the purpose.
Yeah.
But when you look at putting something in like that, and then you look at all the other intricacies that go with it, and I know there's some things that need to be done to it. You know, I know other districts are partnering with other districts and other districts to get a rate, gas rate, things like that. Right, yeah, so I wanted to know, is that something that you currently bid out? Is that current?
You can. So yes, for diesel and heating fuel. So you will get that bid in May. I'm looking at you, May, I think. Back, you have to bid it. So whenever there's a cost that high, you do have to bid it. We can't bid it right now because we don't have a tank. So the districts that currently bid gas would be districts that have the tank. So we have to fill up at the gas station because we don't have a tank. And so you can't bid it out. It's a predetermined price and you don't pay taxes on it. But the only way you can bid it is if you can take the, 7,500 gallons, I think it is at a time, 7,500 gallons of, that's Mr. Brennan back there.
Yeah, they
at a time.
They bid it 2 ways, with the tank transport or the tanker load, and we can select it. We just don't because we don't have the facilities for it. We select diesel and heating oil on our bid. It's a what is it, Ryan?
CSIU.
16. CSIU 16 that we partner with. So whoever is in that group is the partnership that bids it. We're part of it. I'm not sure how we got into it, but that's how we partner and bid that.
We've tried.
In them is 87 octane fuel that you can select if you decide to.
Yeah, it's through a fleet program where we get it at the gas station, but the savings is not necessarily in the gas price. So that's why I think he's saying you're not saving it. It's more in the people's time waiting and risk of them pulling buses and.
It's the management and control of the fueling of the vehicles is what it comes down to.
Yeah, I never claimed to be an expert on this, which is why, if you want to talk kids, I'll talk that all day long, but gas, oil, construction is new, so I appreciate that.
Yeah, we do, and we haven't, the board members have been on the board for a while. We've tried multiple different methods. We've tried bidding it on our own. We're not big enough in most cases. Mr. Brennan's back there has some history with us in terms of trying to help us out in terms of bids. We've done it on our own. We're not big enough, and geographically is a challenge for us, certainly where we're located and where some of the oil and diesel vendors are coming from. We have done fluctuating some years, we've done fixed some years, we've oscillated back and forth between. When the bid comes in, we typically call Bill and say, this is what we think. Some neighboring districts have already received bids for next year, and I was pleasantly surprised what they were locking rates into next year. So I'm hopeful for what the bid will be coming in. But it's, unless you lock into a fixed price, it's a gamble in terms of the market for the next year. But yes, we don't bid gas now. We don't bid tanks of gas. It's being pre-bid on the fleet card as a price. Thank you.
Any other questions? Discussions? Well, we'll have more to come, and with that, I would.
Scott answers. So Scott's answer, I said, can the board borrow sooner than later, like April, take advantage of the interest rate, hold the money into summer 23? I do think you need at least 60 days to borrow, so I don't think you can do it in April. But he said, as long as we can represent that at least 85% of it will be spent by spring of 2025. Can we get approval? Please do the bond. I don't know how long the bond, the resolution on that.
Us to approve it, to go forward with it.
Yeah, I
That
think
would
we need
happen
that.
in April, then it's gonna take probably 60 more days till we get that.
Yeah, I mean, he'll have to do the resolution and I'll have to do all of the bond rating calls and everything, but yes, but I need to know, do you wish to have that on in April? Because he and Kevin Reed at Kingsbury have a lot of work to do between now and then, if you want it on for April.
Now we're gonna push it to May. We could do it on the workshop meeting.
You could take action at a workshop if we advertise it
Right.
to take action. I don't know what I just would, I need to give Kevin Reed and Scott some direction.
Do you have any thoughts on that?
I mean, Ryan and I were asked last month, are we comfortable with the 3.5? We are. There are things you need to consider in terms of the potential disadvantages. I can't, I mean, Scott's your expert in terms of whether or not you will earn more money on it in the bank over the time. I mean, it's so volatile. It's probably the worst time you've ever asked, or the most challenging time you've ever asked him to advise you in terms of predicting the future, essentially, because it is whether or not the 3.5 million is worth more to you in the bank in terms of earning interest versus borrowing now.
That's only part of the question
Right.
too. I mean, the other part is, do we need this stuff?
Yeah.
We're talking about.
Agree.
All right.
Which is dependent upon whether you can commit to spending 85% of whatever you decide to borrow.
All right. I'm going to offer courtesy the floor at this time to end this meeting, and we will continue with this discussion. But is there anyone who would like to address the board at this time? Hearing what we just heard and discussed.
Don't want your job.
Well, it's all part of it. We've been doing it for years, and thank you. Thank you for coming and sticking it out with us, and all your questions and insights. And, we will have an executive session immediately following this meeting for legal purposes. And, ask for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Fatsinger, second by Dr. Hunsinger. Meeting